So we're going to start our program with a fireside chat. I'd love to bring up to the stage and welcome Michael Daschle, Senior Vice President Operations at Brookfield Properties, and Michael Aisner, Senior Vice President Property Management at RXR Realty. They're going to be talking about energy and carbon management and optimization. So our ability to accurately measure and report on carbon emissions and how these related energy management programs are so important and integral to the way we both, as building owners and tenants, reduce consumption and associated emissions as we strive to achieve net carbon zero. And the one thing that's most important about that sentence is we all have to realize that it is not only the landlord's obligation, it's the tenants too. And we really have to, as building owners and managers, partner with our tenants to get there and reach our ultimate goals. So with that, Michael and Michael.
Hi, everybody.
Good morning, everyone.
Sandy, thanks for teeing us up. You hit it right there with the tenant engagement. That's one of my favorites. And Michael here is going to talk a little bit about the energy validation.
Yep. So I think what we'll do is we'll kind of tee up categories 1 and 2. We'll do a brief intro of each category. We're going to have kind of a back and forth about our own perspectives on each, and then we'll launch right into the demo. So kicking it off with category 1, the carbon measurement, verification, reporting, and accounting category. This is near and dear to our hearts. I mean, for anyone who's an owner out there who's made a net zero commitment, you need to be able to prove it, right? You need to be able to measure what you've committed to do publicly. You need to be able to do that in a way that's legitimate, that's transparent, that you can show your tenants, your investors, your lenders, the public, anyone who you want to be able to basically demonstrate the seriousness of your commitment. You have to have the data there, all right? So that is one, picking your baseline, picking how you're going to measure it, dedicating yourself to a particular framework or methodology that goes there, and you have to have some kind of system that you can use to check in on progress, to report your progress, and then to kind of measure and analyze what has been going on so you can project forward that path and really start thinking about where you're going to be along the milestone dates that you set for that commitment. And unless you have that data, unless you have that solid reporting platform, your projections aren't going to be that accurate. Your path to get to zero is not going to be that dependable, and you may get lost along the way. So that's really underlying the fundamental importance of this category from my perspective.
Couldn't have said it better. I'm glad you did. Number 2 is the building and tenant energy management and optimization. And the first thing we have to do is we have to provide transparency. If we want to work as a partnership with our tenants, we have to let our tenants know what they're doing. And I think a lot of the tenants out there are in business to do their business, not to worry about ESG, sustainability, and carbon net zero, right? That's the landlord's job. So if we're going to have a true partnership with them, if we're going to move the needle, considering that they use 60% of that energy in a building, we need to engage them. And how do you do that? Well, the first is you have to tell them what that data is. And then the second is you have to entice them to try and reduce it. And I think a great example is, during the pandemic, we were looking at all of our energy bills, and our energy bills didn't decrease along with the population of our buildings. And the reason is because of all the data that was hooked up, all the computers that are hooked up, and the equipment that just kept running and running and running to sustain the building. So tenants didn't realize that. Landlords, quite frankly, didn't realize that. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do here. A couple of the things that we want to talk about with these with this category specifically is how does the solution help building owners use less energy to heat and cool the buildings? So on top of just a platform that gives you that, are there physical things that we're doing to change the building? Like, let's start there. Let's get that core. Let's get that envelope insulated. Let's make sure that we're not wasting energy by just sending it out into the atmosphere. So that's the first part. And then the second is, how does the solution help the building owners and tenants manage to reduce plug loads? And that's the part that we were just talking about. You've got to know what you're using to start off with. So these two categories, I think, really go hand in hand. And I love the fact that, Mike comes from an asset management perspective and I come from a property management perspective. So Mike, from a property management perspective, I love all the toys that I saw. I love those 60 submissions that I read through. I want to buy them all, but my asset managers never give me the money. So if I come to you and I say, hey, this is going to help us change the world, what do I have to do to convince you to give me the money?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you have to remember that from the asset manager's perspective, we are the owner's representative for that particular asset. We're the ones in the organization who are really responsible for increasing value over time. And so any of these toys, these platforms, these kind of solutions that come in front of us, we want to make sure that they're aiding us in that path. You think about how you add value to a property, right? You think about, okay, your primary customers are your tenants, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to make sure that they stay around, reduce turnover, increase how much renewable, how many people renew at your property, right? Boost the rents, make it an attractive place for people to actually come to. And what's going to do all that is the tenant's going to want to love to be at your building. They want to know that you're being a responsible owner. And so, for example, on the carbon net zero theme, if you're in a property that has committed to go net zero and the owner can prove it, can show it, can message that through its events, right? Can be able to share that data with tenants, with the public. I mean, we already are getting tenants who are looking at our brand new developments saying, are you going to go renewable? Can you help us along our own renewable journey? And again, if we have the tools and the products that can help us do that, then we're adding value for our owners.
All right, so I got to work on my sales pitch then. No, we have some of these tools, and one of the things we found in terms of the optimization side is you get this system, and the system will, and a lot of the submissions kind of speak to this. It sits on top of your BMS, and it gathers this data, and it tells you how to optimize your cooling towers, and your pump speeds, and your water temperatures, and all that stuff based on the variables outside and the occupancy of the building, and my mind's exploding already. The next step there would be to automate that information. Instead of just telling our really great local 94 and 32 BJ operating engineers what to do, what if it did it for you, right? What if it took that next step? So as an operator, that's really enticing to me. But as a local 94 operator, they're like, wait a minute, are you taking my job away? And the answer shouldn't be, you're taking my job away. It should be, I'm making your job more efficient. So you don't have to worry that the clouds came out for an hour. You can have that being automated, and then you can go about the building making sure everything else is buttoned up and that we aren't, losing heat through a pipe that's not ventilated or insulated or something to that effect. So I think people need to change the way that they're looking at these optimization platforms. And then when you layer on that automation, I think it can be really powerful.
I think on that automation front too, it's important to realize that when you have that information, like what are you going to do with it, right? Part of it for sure can be kind of fed back into the BMS, inform a smarter operation of the building. But part of that can be gathering data and analyzing it to find patterns that you may never have thought about before. And when you take a fresh look at kind of the underlying data, maybe you can identify some new solutions. You can think more creatively about your capital planning. These things don't necessarily come up unless you look at them a fresh way.
I think you said it right there. How many times have we walked around a building and you ask somebody what's going on there and why do you do it that way? And they say, well, we've always done it that way. But let's be honest, there's technology today that we didn't have 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and that's what our folks our operational folks are ingrained in doing, and that's the way that our tenants are thinking. And with all this PropTech that's coming to this market, we have to change the way we think about our buildings and the way that we run them, and we have to get a little experimental and trust that there are those little hidden nuggets that we can uncover.
Yeah. I think one way to think about that too, in a somewhat more creative fashion, is one of the ways that many building owners and operators and property managers have thought about new projects is, does it have a payback? Does it have a 3-year payback? Can I prove that this is going to pay for itself in a short amount of time? And I think we need to think about that a little differently. I think that we can start thinking about the payback more in terms of how long you're actually going to hold the property. You can think about layering in the impact that this project may help you avoid penalties for Local 97, for example. It may help you, even if the payback's 5 to 10 years, it may actually help you achieve a net zero goal that's 20 years out there. Mm-hmm. So you can think about these projects in different lights than how they may have traditionally been assessed. And I think that's going to make us get much further down that road.
When we talk about all these other things we now have to start considering, right? Carbon net zero and local law 97 and all these things, we have our platform spread across, and you have a big portfolio and we have a pretty decent sized portfolio, and that's a lot to keep track of. And you have to trust your data, and you have to also get it organized. So, one of the things we were talking about a little earlier was maybe having a single source of truth. Some of the submissions talked about having that single source of truth and being able to provide that to an owner, saying, come here, we're going to manage all of your energy needs, whether it's water, whether it's waste, whether it's steam and carbon emissions. And that's a tool that I'm going to find really valuable as an operator. What about on the asset side?
Yeah, so I think that one of the biggest frustrations out there with the software platforms that do exist is exactly what you're saying. I'm gonna have to go to this one to get this particular data, and then it's gonna export in this format. Then I have to format that myself to put it into this format so I can use it for my reporting. And so if you want that single source of truth, it has to be something that is flexible enough, adaptive enough to be able to inform the owner to do what they want to do from a planning perspective and a reporting perspective. And this is not, the single stop shop all in one dashboard we're looking for. We're just looking for the kind of data that you can slice and dice and analyze in a way that's meaningful for you as an owner. And again, back to adding value. If you can't use that data to actually inform smart capital planning, smart leasing strategy, smart procurement strategy, I mean, all these things should be actionable. All this data needs to lead to insightful, actionable information.
We also talked about renewable energy and getting credits, and I think, you got to retire those credits, right? And that comes to data integrity and trusting where you got it from. So I think some of the platforms and some of the solutions that were offered offer that, right? That single source of truth and then the data integrity on top of it. So have you seen any of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's critical. So, as many who have started down the path to renewable energy procurement can attest, it's one thing is to decide that you're going to go net zero, right? The other thing is to decide how you're going to do that. Procurement is a huge way of approaching that. And when I talk about procurement, I'm talking about like energy purchasing, renewable energy credits, the things that you can do from, how you power your building to do that. There are 100 different ways you can buy power, right? You can buy unbundled RECs, you can buy bundled RECs, you can buy VPPAs. I mean, like this new acronym mix is confusing all by itself. But again, net zero and proving it is the theme. And so if you decide that you're going to go to a way where you're buying energy and the associated RECs, you need to be able to show that hour for hour, ideally, you're matching your energy consumption to renewably sourced power. The best way you can do that was a platform that has the clarity to show you and all your stakeholders that that's exactly how you're using energy, that's where you got it from. You can elevate that, you can be transparent about it, you can talk about it a lot more informed. But again, just being able to show how you're buying, how that's meeting your goals, and and where that comes from is just adds a whole level of transparent validity to your claims.
I think that it's maybe a couple years away, right? The need for that specific product. Right now, I can write an ESG report. I could file for GRESB. I could do whatever I want. I'm putting my data in, and it doesn't count, right? This is a score it's a public score, and people want to know it. But until 2024 comes and that legislation hits you with penalties, there's really nobody kind of, making sure that what you're submitting is accurate. These are the tools that we're going to need in a couple years. So if you want to be an early adapter, you want to start thinking about this stuff now, right? And you want to get it into your building. You want to ingrain it into the way that your asset management teams are thinking and your property teams are thinking. And then you can get that back to your tenants, because I don't know if you're seeing it on your side. We have tenants that are now asking on the way into a building, are you LEED? Are you doing this? Are you renewables? And it's not a nice to have anymore. It's you gotta have, or we're not even gonna have you on our list, right? So that's really important. And it was really interesting to see the shift. We've been talking to brokers about this for years. We've been talking to brokers about this for years. Now they're finally asking the property teams, hey, what's going on with these renewable credits? And do we have this at the building? And what can we offer, the tenants coming in that are now paying attention? And once the tenants get engaged and we start, asking those questions, I think we're gonna really start to see things happen.
Yeah, it's become a gating criteria, and to your point about the legislation, I mean, you don't want the first year that you're reporting for Local 987 to be the first time that you're looking at your software and be like, okay, so how are we going to take a look at this? We have to report next year. Or God forbid it comes 2025, you're looking back at 2024 and be like, well, how did we do? They're a little late, now is the perfect time to start mapping that out, forecasting exactly what you're going to need to do over the next few years to really identify your risk, to mitigate that. And again, from the asset owner perspective, you're adding value. One of the ways you add value is you mitigate risk. If you're looking out in 2024 and you're seeing penalties, that's a risk. That's a risk not only to you as an owner, but to lenders, to investors, to tenants. They don't want to be exposed to that kind of thing either. So you need a platform that you can measure it, data to help you forecast it, and then to inform what we're talking about in the category 2, the projects that you need to do to actually get you where you need to be.
Yep. And I think we know it's two parts, these projects, right? One is the transparency, the understanding of the data and how your buildings can be optimized. But then there's also the piece of what are you doing at the building? Are you changing your windows? Are you, changing your chillers? Are you insulating all the pipes that you can be insulating? And we saw a wide array of products and platforms submitted to us, and it was really encouraging to see that there is technology out there for us to address it at the building and then in the cloud, really. So we're going to hit it from both sides.
And how are you kind of assessing which properties you decide to take on in that mix? I mean, I'm sure you're getting lots of proposals, lots of ideas, lots of toys that you want to look at. I mean, what's your normal process for that?
That's a great question. It has to be customized. Every building has a different story. We have a different tenant mix. I have a building that's 100 years old. I have a building that's 20 years old. It's not the same solution for both. So while you have to customize it at the building, I also want a holistic platform that I can have, my complete control over that single source of truth. So it is a balancing act. And it's also whatever my guys give me money to spend. That's key to it too, right? So if you're a vendor out there and you've got this platform, just because it's a cool platform and a cool tool doesn't mean we can buy it, because it might not fit into our model. We might not have underwritten to add 15 cents a square foot in software costs when right now I've got engineers running around that can probably do it manually. And that's a hard conversation to have, is when do we, start relying a little bit more on technology for efficiencies versus our older way of thinking about things.
Yep. And I think I would caution some of the providers of these solutions not to approach owners and say, like, we can do anything you want to do, just tell us what you want to do. That's almost too much information for owners to deal with, right? The ideal situation is you come with a kind of catered solution, and ideally you've done your research to say, hey, we know you made a net zero goal. You're going to have to track your progress here. We're going to help you identify projects, help you map your progress toward those goals, help you assess, opportunities going forward. But it shouldn't necessarily always be like, we can do anything and everything you want. We'll give you a neat dashboard. We'll give you all these options. Just tell us what you want to do. Many times the owner is looking for enough information to help us decide what to do.
Michael, I think it'd be irresponsible if we didn't address something up here too. We manage pretty Class A, robust portfolios, but we're not the only game in town. And there's a lot of other owners out there that don't have dedicated groups that are thinking about this. There's a lot of Class B and Class C owners out there that either don't have the resources or the facilities or the staffing to absorb this. So while we're sitting up here on panels and we're, pseudo experts of this industry, there's a lot of your customer base out there that doesn't have this level. So you need to know how to tailor your approach to them so that they could absorb it, understand it, and really filter through. I don't want to call it noise, but there's a lot of competition out there, right? Everybody comes to us with really similar solutions, and how is this one different from this one, and how am I going to achieve my goals? So while we like to think we're the biggest audience in the room, we're not the only audience in the room. So, I think that's important for the market to understand.
Yeah, there's a huge educational effort that goes along with that. I've heard of, many of these owners that are, family businesses that have owned these properties for a long time. They're getting smart on it, but where to start, how to do kind of low-hanging fruit on the projects, how to start tracking this information at scale that they've never really had to do before. And I'm mostly focused on office, but you think about like these large condo buildings, co-op buildings, they're facing some serious exposure with this upcoming legislation, and there's tons of solutions out there for them, but they're not necessarily being connected to them.
Yep. So, we've kind of gone through our list here. We've talked about a lot of great stuff here. I don't know if this is a Q&A type of situation or if we're just going to kind of wrap it up from there. What do you think?
We have time for a question or two.
All right, let's do it.
Mike, we forgot to plant questions.
Thought that was your job.
Bonnie?
Good morning, Michael. So this is a question for both of you, and maybe this group will be interested in it. What keeps you up at night?
Bonnie asked, what keeps us up at night? And besides the typical fires and floods, it's how do you get a handle on this and really, how do we make a real impact in the industry? How do we do that? If that 60% energy user, those tenants aren't paying attention, how do we actually accomplish this? And not just buying credits to offset penalties, how do we really make moves to carbon zero?
I think one of the things I focus on the most is really just education. And I know that kind of sounds funny, but I mean, this is a new enough field where you're making big decisions on relatively new information in a field that not many people understand. And so there's a lot of new experts out there. There's a lot of information that's coming from a whole new field of kind of new consultants, experts. And what I worry about is the time and the energy and the ability to focus on actionable insight that I can trust to recommend to the people who are making these big decisions, to the owners, investors, lenders, tenants. I mean, if we're going off information that we don't fully understand, that's not fully vetted, that is hearsay, this can drive us down the wrong path really quickly. And we have a fiduciary responsibility for our investors, for sure, but we also have a responsibility for our tenants, to the community. If we're making uninformed decisions, I think that's very dangerous. And so, I worry a lot about where do I get the right information? Who do I trust to give me that information? Can I trust my own data? These things are really important.
Hands are going up.
Yeah. Robin?
How does New York stack up to the rest of the country?
New York is far ahead, I think. There are only a few states out there, I think, that are as progressive as New York is in this area. It can be challenging as a real estate owner to deal with that, but it's also invigorating. Like it changes the whole framework that you're working in. It changes the environment for making these types of decisions. It elevates your game. It's a different opportunity to do Class A commercial real estate in New York versus other places, and especially in the context of carbon emissions and Local Law 97. I mean, this is cutting edge stuff that everyone's figuring out how to do, and here more than anywhere.
What versus the rest of the world? Who's kind of leading that?
I think costs of utilities in Europe have been higher for a long time, and they might have a couple steps ahead of us on that one. But we learn, we see what's out there too, and we're following suit, so we're right behind them.
Last question, and then I'm gonna get going to the presentations.
Thank you for this, guys. Do you feel achieving net zero will fundamentally shift your goals? If so, how? Thank you.
People always need to keep the lights on in a building, so I'll always have a job.
I mean, the nature of my job right now and for the past 12 months has been solely focused on our path to net zero. So I've got my work cut out for me for the next 20 years. But I would say that is going to be a defining focus of operations and asset management going forward anyway, is managing to net zero. It'll change our capital planning process. It'll change our reporting and what investors are asking for. It'll change how we market our space to tenants. So I'd say it's already fundamentally changed our roles, and it will just continue to do so going forward.
Thank you, Michael. Great job.